All right, good afternoon and good morning in some places, and welcome to today's Fire Chat Friday. It's straight up noon, so I wanted to make the most of the time with some great information and also allow for questions. Like previous Fire Chat Fridays, we'll hold all questions until after everyone's talked. You can put them in the chat box. We will be monitoring and holding them to the side just to make sure that those are addressed as well. So again, welcome to our 18th Fire Chat Friday and the first one for 2024. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Molly Anthony, BLM Fire Division Chief for Fire Planning and Fuels Management. Go ahead, Molly.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to introduce Colleen Haskell and Karen Dante Wood, two excellent leaders in the wildland fire science community who will be here to present on the Joint Fire Science Program and its importance to wildland fire management. Colleen is the program manager for the JFSP at the National Interagency Fire Center here in Boise, and Karen is the technology transfer specialist also here at NIFC. The JFSP is an interagency program that helps ensure land managers are connected to the latest science in wildland fire. JFSP serves an essential link between science and management for 15 science exchanges across the country. Much of my career has been spent in the Great Basin, where I've consistently relied on and utilized the Great Basin Science Exchange as one of those one-stop shops for events and webinars, research, the latest decision support tools, and training opportunities. These resources are critical to enhancing the decision-making ability of fire and fuels managers, natural resource managers, policymakers, and practitioners. And now in my current role as Division Chief over Fuels Management, I recognize the tremendous support JFSP provides to research needs across the country, as well as supporting master and doctoral students in the field of wildland fire. Within the fuels program specifically, research funded through JFSP has helped promote a better understanding of fuels treatment effectiveness in different locations, as well as understanding the longevity of those treatments and their effects on ecosystems and natural resources. This work is just one little snippet of the science that JFSP supports and that bureaus depend on for program implementation. Today, Colleen and Karen are going to provide an overview of JFSP, discuss 3 of the funding categories, and describe the Fire Science Exchange Network and the direct connection they provide to land managers across the country. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Colleen and Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. We really appreciate your insight and the perspective that you bring as a practitioner. And before we get started, I think we're going to put up a polling question so that we can kind of gauge the audience and see who's here today with us. So, did you know that the Joint Fire Science Program provided initial funding in support of IFTDIS, the Interagency Fuel Treatment Decision Support System? Also, initial research for Safety Zone and the COVID-19 risk assessment tool. So go ahead and put in your answer so that we can kind of get an idea of how familiar you are already with our program. Okay, we've got a little more than half of you who have already answered. Come on, there we go. And this gives us a really good platform to recognize. I'm seeing that by and large, you're not familiar with that. So it gives us an opportunity to share both what we've already done and what we're looking for towards the future. Okay, it looks like everyone answered. Thank you. So once again, almost 3/4 of you had not realized some of those initial funding efforts. So with that, we're going to go ahead and just give you kind of an overview of what we do and really building on what Molly introduced for us today. So thank you again for joining us. And I'm just going to provide a little bit of a nutshell elevator speech version of what we do, and then I'll show you some more examples as we move through our program. Karen's going to emphasize more on the Fire Science Exchange Network and the science delivery aspect of what we do, which is very unique. So statutorily, or that's kind of a big word for authorized by Congress, we were formed as a joint partnership between the DOI and the USDA in 1998. and we provide leadership to the wildland fire science community by identifying high priority fire science research needs. And really, we want to enhance the decision-making ability of fire managers so that you can meet your objectives. And one way that we do this is by providing funding and science exchange for research studies related to managing wildfire fuels and fire impacted ecosystems. What really sets us apart from other research entities is that we are highly positioned to respond to emerging needs from managers, practitioners, and policymakers from the local to national level. So the way that we do that is we tailor timely wildland fire research through an annual cycle of proposal solicitation, review, and funding, and then eventually the science exchange that creates the entire cycle. Like I said, Karen's going to spend a lot of time today sharing more information about the exchanges in just a few minutes, because most likely that is your interface with our outputs and outcomes. I like to think of us kind of as amplifiers, or some refer to us as conveners, because JFSP research projects complement and extend in-house capacity for other federal fire research programs, including the U.S. Forest Service research stations and the USGS. So however you want to frame it up, what really sets us apart is the emphasis on science that supports management needs. In other words, you. We do have 7 different interagency partners, full partners, and that includes the DOI Office of Wildland Fire, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the BLM, Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Forest Service, National Park Service, and USGS. And so while we have 7 federal partners, our collaboration extends to private and nonprofit partners as well, organizations that are both large and small, including universities, federal agencies, tribal, state, county, and local governments. In some of our exchange areas, we don't have any federal land ownership, but we still have a strong need to partner with our organizations. And overall, nearly 300 organizations have become partners with JFSP funded research. I want to talk a little bit about how we're governed and what our operation looks like, because this is where you may interface as well with our governing board and the program office. We do have a 12-member governing board represented by those 7 federal agencies. So in the Department of Interior, we have 6, and from the USDA Forest Service, we have 6. And our charter is through the Fire Executive Committee. And they're meeting right now to talk about some of the futuring for the Joint Fire Science Program. So our representatives are from those interagency partners, but they also represent research, fire management, resource management, to present those diverse perspectives, and especially so that we can get a broad portfolio of funding. I want to advance to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is a real look, a personal look at our governing board. We have 4 brand new Forest Service members in the last couple of months. And last week we met here in Boise to discuss some strategic visioning and team building. So very productive, and for the first time in several years, we have a full house. And on the right, that's the program office. We are a small but mighty force. On the left is our full-time science advisor, Molly Hunter. And then y'all get to know Karen in a few, but she's our Dynamo Tech Transfer Specialist and the coordinator for the 15 members Fire Science Exchange Network. Myself, there, third from the left, I recently rejoined JFSP after a hiatus back into fire meteorology with predictive services. And last but not least, on the right is Becky Jennison. She's our rockstar program management analyst who's been with the program since its infancy, and she's helped grow and evolve this program. You might know Becky from her other seat. She's a dispatch supervisor, and you may have even gotten a resource order from her over the years. Okay, so remember I was talking about this cycle of funding and back through exchange. This isn't just a delivery mechanism, it's intended to be an ongoing, very dynamic cyclical process. And the key elements of our mission are to provide credible research that's tailored to the needs of fire fuels, natural resources, and land managers. Because we engage and listen to you and develop focused strategic lines of work and research responsive to your needs. So what we do is we solicit proposals from researchers who compete for the funding through a very rigorous process. Then that is peer reviewed. Each of the proposals go through peer review, and I'll make a plug here and then also later in the program, asking for subject matter expertise to review the proposals each year. And that is designed to ensure the most relevant projects are funded. So really, we focus on science delivery when the research is completed with an assortment of communication tools that Karen will talk about. But we want to ensure that you are aware of, understand, that we're able to translate and give you the information that you need to make sound decisions that will help you to implement your projects on the ground. Okay, next I'm going to get into the 3 types of funding that we provide on those annual cycles. We call them Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFOs, in the government, and those funding announcements represent primary, graduate research innovation, and Fire Science Exchange Network. So the primary, those are for government and non-government entities that have an opportunity to apply for a range of current research priorities called task statements, and that's on the annual basis. And then through workforce development support, we have the GRIN program. That's really the darling of our workforce development right now, where we invite current master's students and doctoral students enrolled at colleges and universities in the US. Anybody in the field of wildland fire and related physical, biological, or social sciences can apply for a GRIN award. And then last but not least, the third type of funding that we provide is the Fire Science Exchange Network. They do also have to compete for funding. There are 15 of them, and on any given year, we have proposals from them that we are reviewing with our board advisors. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples that you might already be familiar with or not. So during the pandemic, the COVID-19 incident risk assessment tool was developed. It was a cost shared agreement that was funded by JFSP, Colorado State University, and the US Department of Agriculture Forest Service. So the tool was developed to support line officers and incident management teams to provide assessment of COVID-19 risks in fire camps at the incident level. It was created by Jake Dillett, Aaron Belval, Jude Bayham, and Matthew Thompson, and they are with the fire modeling team. And so the way it worked is a numerical risk score and visual graphic was generated based on user inputs for 3 risk factors and 9 subfactors. So that tool has and will continue to play a valuable role in addressing firefighter safety, but this is something that really launched and springboarded our efforts towards firefighter health and wellness overall, something that we consider to be a sustained research topic and emerging need. Another area of firefighter safety is the safety zone research that JFSP funded. Wesley Page and Brett Butler evaluated the guidelines for determining the size of the safety zones. And they found that the recommended safety zone sizes were inadequate that before the previous, like the information that you get in your IRPG and all of your training that you do. So they developed new guidelines by adjusting the safety zone size using the slope wind factor. So the greater the slope or the wind, the larger the safety zone needs to be. That's what you need to remember. Those are incorporated into the latest IRPG as well. So I mentioned the Graduate Research Innovation Award. These are yearly awards for a handful of top quality graduate students that are conducting research already in wildland fire science. And the topics that we have or have had for the last few years, and they can change: fuels management and fire behavior, changing fire environments, emissions and air quality, fire effects and post-fire recovery, relative impacts of prescribed fire versus wildfire, and the human dimensions of fire, so more of the social science. So these awards are intended to nurture the next generation of fire, fuels, and natural resource scientists and managers. And I'm really proud to say that several of the folks that are working in our Fire Science Exchange Network have been recipients of the GRIN Awards over the last several years as well. Okay, with that, we are going to pause and ask you another poll question and pivot towards Karen.
Great. Thank you, Colleen. Yes, if folks could take a couple seconds and answer this following question. And, which of the exchanges in the Fire Science Exchange Network have you interacted with and or might be familiar with? I can put up a map. I'd be curious if any of you have, and if so, where? Which point during this presentation or even later, how familiar you are with the Exchange Network. But the way how I'm going to phrase my bit of the presentation will be kind of starting at the very beginning in terms of how the idea came about, this concept of creating this Fire Science Exchange Network, which Colleen mentioned is our third funding criteria or third funding category that we have at JFSP. So one of the strengths of JFSP is that we are conducting routine evaluations and program reviews, self-assessments, either internally, third party as well. And one of the assessments that was conducted in 2007, it essentially found that our program just wasn't recognized by the management community. And there was a lot of products and models that JFSP had a hand in, products like the Natural Fuels Photo Series or the Fire and Fire Surrogate Study. And folks just didn't know that, JFSP maybe provided some initial support and kind of was the impetus for getting some of this going. IFTDIS, for example, that you answered at the beginning of this presentation. So that was one recommendation or one finding that came out from an evaluation. Another finding that came out was through a program review that was conducted, and it essentially revealed that at that time, so this is 2007, was that our program needed more of a regional technology transfer tool to essentially take all of our JFSP fire funded research, there's a lot of it, but disseminated in a manner that was more strategic, as opposed to the manner at that time, which was more ad hoc, maybe not as streamlined. We were disseminating information through some e-newsletters and digest briefs that we conducted, but it wasn't more of a coordinated strategic effort at that time. And certainly we were a new program as well. And so what this revealed to us is there was so much science out there. We needed it to get down into the hands of managers in a way that made sense. And so in 2009, we really broke our conventional mold of science delivery and created these 15 regionally based exchanges. So I'll quickly show a map here, and there'll be a map on the next slide as well. So what is the Fire Science Exchange Network? And so I do want to emphasize a couple of points here. Again, this is JFSP's biggest achievement in science delivery. So as you can see here on the map, you have a network of 15 regionally based fire science exchanges spread across the country, including Alaska and Hawaii. And essentially, these are agreements that JFSP has with academic institutions, federal agencies, like the Forest Service research stations, for example. And essentially, these exchanges facilitate information exchange between researchers and managers on the ground. It's really that active knowledge exchange and helping to facilitate that between researchers and managers. So they've been with us, and they were created around 2009, 2010, and it's become a real powerful tool for relaying information among a variety of different audiences. And I think this quote up here sums it up really well, and I want to dive into that a little bit. So Tim Swedberg, he was the former JFSP communications director, and he said, creating knowledge isn't enough. The customer needs to know how to use it. And I bet this is something you all can relate to. We're inundated with information on a daily basis. There's so much of it, and it's hard to make sense of, well, what do I really need to know for the work that I'm doing? And so this is really where the exchanges shine and where they come into play. They filter information, act like a filter of information. They weed out information that is not regionally relevant to their particular location. So as you can see here on the map, the exchanges vary in size based on their geographies, ecosystems, also based on how much money they get from JFSP. But they've done a really nice job at filtering this information so you don't feel like, you're having to drink water from an overwhelming hose, for example. So the real strength here has been that these exchanges foster communication and collaboration, again, between researchers and managers, and they do this through really user-friendly, digestible ways. I know a lot of you are strapped for time, so what's nice is they'll take access and give you access to the latest fire science publications, but then they'll also translate it into short fire little briefs and fact sheets. They'll offer webinars and workshops. They do a lot of hands-on trainings. They'll sponsor field tours, in-person workshops, hold discussion forums. And so there's a plethora of ways that they're disseminating science and getting it to their users, their practitioners on the ground. I think the big takeaway here that I want you to walk away with is it really is like a form of an active courtship phase. There's that active, interactive knowledge exchange between researchers and managers on the ground. So we have several objectives of the Exchange Network. I won't spend too much time here. I merely wanted to highlight it, show you this graphic in terms of what are some of the things that the exchanges really focus on. So sharing information and building relationships is key. Again, what's really unique about the way the Exchange Network operates, it really goes beyond the federal agency line. So you're working with NGOs, tribes, academic institutions, at state, county, local governments. And so there's a strong emphasis on, sharing information across all those audiences, building those relationships. Highlighting applicable research, again, we're also inundated with information. It's nice where the exchanges find information that's applicable to that area and are able to highlight it for the work that you're all doing. Translating science. I know we all have reports that sit on our shelves, so the exchanges do a really nice job at taking that science, translating it again into user-friendly, digestible ways in this day and age. Another great, objective of the Exchange Network is they actually show you and demonstrate work on the ground. And so a plug here, we'll be making lots of plugs, but one that I'll make here is find your local Exchange Network and maybe sign up for an event if your time and schedule allows for it, where you'll actually get to see, meet with them on the ground and see how they're able to take some of the science and show you how to apply it into management. But it's not a one-way street. They want input from you in terms of how you want to receive information. So it creates a really nice dialogue, an opportunity for you all to see this on the ground. Colleen mentioned, we solicit proposals on a yearly basis based on what we hear about in the field. So the Exchange Network is one aspect of that. They will work with all of you to identify what are some emerging critical needs you have in the field. And then they'll bring those to JFSP, and then we'll work with our science advisor, Molly, to create those solicitations and funding topics that go out. And then lastly, and really want to emphasize this point on supporting adaptive management. So again, really that strong communication collaboration between a manager and a researcher on the ground from the get-go in product development. I won't spend too much time here on the exchange structure. I think that's what's really nice about JFSP and how we fund this is there's not too many bounds. We're not overly prescriptive in how we want the work to be done. These exchanges know their audiences and so are able to. So there's a very flexible approach in how they communicate and disseminate the information. But the general structure is that each of these exchanges will have a principal investigator, a coordinator. These are the doers. They're the ones who set up the events, forge and build those relationships. And then a lot of them also have an advisory board. The look and feel will vary, but what's great about it is a diverse board. So you can expect tribal perspectives on there, NGOs, state, local, federal agencies in some cases as well. So it's a really it's interdisciplinary as well as a very diverse group of folks that help inform how an exchange, does the work that they do. Colleen did mention, these folks do have to compete. So every 3 to 5 years, these exchanges will have to get new agreements. And so they'll have to apply through GFSP through an open peer review competitive process. And again, because of the size of each of these exchanges varies, their funding levels also vary. So right now, the levels vary from maybe 150,000 a year to 320,000 a year, based on their size and complexity of their area. I mentioned this previously, but I think it's a neat snapshot to see who are some of the active participants within the exchanges. Again, it goes beyond, federal agencies. We have NGOs, universities, private landowners, as Colleen had mentioned. For example, one of our exchanges, the Great Plains, I think it's 98% private lands there and 2% maybe federal agencies. So it's a great way to see how they're taking the science there and working with private landowners. There's a big emphasis on prescribed burn associations where they're at. So again, it's neat to see how these exchanges are delivering science to their various audiences that they have. I'll hit on this point once more, fostering that trust, communication, and collaboration between researchers and managers. That truly is one of the key purposes of the exchange network. Now, one of the exchanges deliver their information, I mentioned, through a slew of different platforms and materials to help promote, they promote transparency and open dialogue. There's a lot of collaborative activities, and I mentioned some of them earlier, but also a lot of multi-exchange activities. So I want to give you a quick example here. Many exchanges, identify with similar fire science topics or have similar fire science topic issues where they reside. So they come together and they pool their resources and their partners and speakers, and then they will put on different types of workshops. So a great example, this is just one of many, but the Fueling Collaboration Series is essentially a lot of the exchanges out east who have come together and identified similar topics. And what they do is they hold kind of open panel discussions on different topics, and I think they're on season 3 or 4 right now. And it's been a really neat forum to move away from a traditional presenter and then having Q&A, and it's essentially a panel discussion where you'll have 4 or 5 speakers, and it's an interactive forum. A lot of the exchanges also deliver information through online and direct communications. So another plug here would be to sign up for any newsletters from your local exchange. Here you'll hear about events, the latest science, how to use some of the latest science. A lot of them also have social media if you're into following any of those pages to get your information. I mentioned partnerships, and then as well, a lot of them have a database where they do collect some of the research needs. We have a national database on firescience.gov. Colleen will walk through some of our resources later, so I'll just leave that plug there for now. So a couple more slides and then we'll segue into more of a Q&A portion, and want to hear from all of you. Here are some of our accomplishments from our exchanges. So we ask exchanges to give us information on a yearly basis on their outputs, things that they have accomplished on the ground, products that they have developed. So here's a quick snapshot. You'll see newsletters, webinars, conferences and workshops, short courses, video production. So again, really spans and is a variety of different tools and platforms that our exchanges use to get you information. And then we also ask exchanges, where possible, to let us know who participated in their events. And I showed you a snapshot of that earlier, but last year we had approximately 24,000 individuals who participated, which is really great. Again, fostering and building those relationships, being a strength of the exchanges. So similar to what Colleen did, I want to just show you some examples and just to help connect the dots. And you may have seen some of these products come out. And if you have, feel free to put that in the chat. It's always nice for us to see if you're familiar with some of this information. So one notable example is from the Southwest, as you all know, a leader there, big use of prescribed fire. And so a couple years ago, folks at the Southern Fire Exchange, which is based out of Tallahassee, Florida, and researchers, they recognized the need to move some of the Duff fire research findings into the hands of managers. They had really good information, and so they brought together the research community, the science and management community, and put on different workshops and roundtables where both scientists and managers had time together, and they worked on formulating, burn prescriptions based on different factors that you see here on the screen. And I think this is, again, a really good example of that cycle Colleen had mentioned at the beginning, where how science is making its way into the hands of managers, and that really being the end goal of what we do. Similarly, I want to talk about another example. This one is about education, and this comes to us from our Alaska Fire Science Consortium. So for the last 2 years, they have been working on a WUI fire site. I think it's called a Yankovich Road fire site there on university land in Alaska. And this, what made this fire really interesting was that the fire was on university land that is accessible from their visitor center. And so initially, you can see a snapshot on the left-hand side, they had used the burn for fire effects monitoring. And soon it became a really big site where they started to take groups out there for tours to actually, see the landscape. On the right, you'll see a picture with NOAA's administrator at the time in 2022. And so what they decided to do is basically take this as an educational opportunity and put up signage and use kind of different educational materials to highlight the work taking place here, as well as to help people make a connection with the land and the fire with what was happening at the time. I have, I think, two more examples maybe. So the third example I have here, and maybe some of you have seen this, is, and this was really great for me and exciting for me. I attended a RT 130 refresher in 2021, and the instructor was talking about safety zones and escape routes. And then they pulled up this story map, and you can see the top picture there. It says JFSP success story. And it was really exciting to see, again, something that we had funded had made its way again into more of the management community, and was used in this forum. So for those of you who are not familiar, this story map was created by the Southwest Consortium, and it focuses on entrapment avoidance, safety zones, escape routes. Really good research to back a lot of this information here, has been widely used, and this was just one example of where we saw that it was being used, and we're really excited to see that. Have one more example, and this goes back to what Colleen had mentioned about the type of research that we've funded in the past. And, it was essentially physical hard sciences at the very beginning, but as you all know, where we're going now, there's a big emphasis on the social science, and that's just equally important as well. And so JFSP has funded a lot of research in this realm. A good example of the work that's come out of our exchanges was a couple of exchanges getting together, recognizing the importance and the need behind this. And so we have the Northern Rockies Exchange, the Northwest, Great Basin, Southern Rockies, and California. They essentially came together. This was a really big effort, and they put on a 3-day webinar that focused on wildland firefighter health in 2022. And what was great was how many people tuned into this, but also how the information was presented. They had professionals and agency leaders that shared the current science. Then they went into the knowledge behind it. We talked about tools that are available to support wildland firefighter physical and mental health. Certainly the start to a much bigger dialogue, but it's, again, a good example of seeing how responsive exchanges are to, again, emerging and current issues that are coming up. So this brings us, I feel, so that wraps up essentially the exchange portion. So thanks for giving me your time. But now we'd love to hear from you. And so Jennifer, we have another poll, if we can cue that up, on if folks use any of the exchange products to inform their work. Have you attended any FSEN events, either in person or online? If so, which ones? And I think this would help inform some of the dialogue we'll be having in a couple minutes. Okay, so while folks are thinking about it, and certainly we have some time for Q&A, maybe, Colleen, this would be a good time to segue based on our earlier poll about our work, and I think most of the crowd wasn't very familiar with, you know, where they could get maybe some additional resources. Shall we segue to that part on how they can get involved and learn more?
Yeah, so what I can do is provide a little demo of how to navigate through our website and a couple of ways that you can get involved with the program if you're not already. So I'll go ahead and shift over to that. Let me know when you're seeing it, Karen.
Yes, I can see the website.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So the way to get to our website, and it is in the chat as well, is www.firescience.gov. And want to highlight over here to subscribe to our weekly Friday Flash newsletters, or to offer suggestions on topics that you'd like to highlight for future newsletters. Go over here on the right-hand side and enter your email address and sign up. We also put all of those on our social media platforms. But if you're wondering what that might look like, what a newsletter, just get a flavor, go to this tab here that says newsletters. And as that populates, I'm having some very slow connectivity issues today. Hopefully this will populate. I don't know why it isn't. Well, there we go. Okay, Friday Flash topics of recent, the last few weeks. You can just kind of peruse that and see what topics might interest you and get a general sense of some of the subject matter that we are presenting to you each week. And again, if you have any suggestions or topics that you'd like us to cover, please send those our way. Our email addresses will be posted in the chat today as well. The other information that I wanted to show you on our website, you can go under the research tab, and we have a database where you can search by completed, ongoing, or archived information based on the year, the topic, and who the principal investigator or the research scientist is. Another area that I really like to look at myself, already Karen has kind of highlighted story maps. You can go into the resource library and select by type. So this gives you an idea of some of the different mechanisms that we use for science delivery. Say you want to listen to the podcast that we did a couple of weeks ago, Wildfire Matters, or you want to look at success stories, any of the different formats or interpretations or translations of the science that we're presenting. You can also focus it or filter it by the location or the region that you're interested in, and so on and so forth. Finally, some publications that we have here. We used to have a lot more handheld printed material, and now in our digital age, we've shifted quite a bit, but I still think it's really important for you to be able to know where to go. One of the most, I think, comprehensive publications that we have is our 20-year, it's down here towards the bottom. It's a 20-year retrospective of the Joint Fire Science Program. So if you're interested in learning a little more about what we've funded and how the topics have changed or not changed, how we're building on it throughout the years of our 26-year history, you can get an idea of what kinds of publications we have there. One of the publications that I'd really like to highlight is a little bit of a different medium, telling fire's story through narrative and art. That was a calling that we had through the Southwest Fire Science Exchange and through Alaska. And so another interpretation of how we get science into the hands of users at the right time. As well, more emphasis on the traditional ecological knowledge, tribal knowledge, and cultural burning, as well as different priorities that we've had over the years. So that's a way that you can kind of get familiar with our website. Of course, our website kind of doubles as a database. So if you are a science researcher, that's how you manage your projects, is through our database by signing into our website. As well, we do post our notice of funding opportunities on the funding tab. So that's where you can view the current announcements. Typically, we post those in late summer or fall. And then that is where you can go in and look at how to put in a proposal for funding research. So those are a couple of different ways that you can engage with us. As well, I had already put in a plug for subject matter experts and peer reviewers. So when we get our emails into the queue there, you can always send us a message.
They're posted in the queue, so you guys don't hesitate to reach out to Colleen and Karen.
There we go. Okay, so like Karen said, we'd really like to open this up to more of a Q&A. I think we've got plenty of time to do that. So I'll turn it back over to you, Jennifer.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Colleen and Karen, for that great presentation. Like I said, all the information is in the chat box, their contact information, link to the Wildfire Matters podcast that they joined Carrie Bilbao on a couple weeks ago. That link's in there, as well as a link to the signing up for the Fire Flash Friday and any of those fabulous documents and things they have on their Joint Fire Science webpage. If you have any questions, this is the time to go ahead and put them in the chat box. We'll be more than happy to answer them. Don't be afraid this Friday. Anybody out there that are actually belong to exchanges that want to maybe provide a little bit of insight from where you guys are doing? But we do have one from Dennis Strange. Are you willing to come meet with folks for Q&A? Are you asking them to come for a presentation?
Yeah, I'd like some clarification from your question.
Pre and post season meetings.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that we could format topical material around the preseason, that's relevant to the kickoff, and then postseason meetings, of course, as well. Definitely always available, especially, I didn't really mention this, but all of our program office staff members, the 4 of us that I showed our picture, we are all red carded fire managers. That's the first time in our history that all of us have been involved as going to fires. I did mention that Becky's in dispatch. Karen is a PIO, and so is Molly. And I'm a technical specialist meteorologist, so interested in going on fire reviews and so forth. But yes, we're definitely able to go to pre and post fire meetings and answer questions that are more relevant to you at the time.
All right, yeah, Dennis, go ahead and just reach out to them directly and they'll be more than happy to help you. But we do have a couple of questions in the chat. One of them was, what region are you in? And I think you guys mentioned you guys are at the National Interagency Fire Center here in Boise, Idaho. And so what, is that a specific region, or are you guys just like your national headquarters? Is that what you guys are calling that?
I think, so that was from Jeannie, who is our one of our coordinators for the Great Basin Fire Science Exchange. So I think she's trying to facilitate, answer Dennis's questions. So that's another thing, Dennis, that would be a great plug is, certainly we're welcome to, more than happy to come, but also reaching, with the local exchange, getting our principal investigators and coordinators out to any of those meetings, would love that.
All right, we have one from Samantha Storms. What is the difference between a consortium and an exchange?
That's a good one because it's all about terminology, right? And verbiage. Karen mentioned kind of the history of the Fire Science Exchange Network. And before it was a consolidated one network that had 15 regional members, there were individual folks that naturally gravitated towards each other and formed a regional exchange in the Southwest. And I believe that they called themselves the Southwest Fire Science Consortium. And so really what happened as it evolved is the network formed and absorbed or included the Southwest Consortium, likewise for the Northwest. And so in order for them to maintain the continuity with their user base and their stakeholders, they kept the name consortium, but it is one of the 15 regional fire science exchanges. And the word exchange, that's very deliberate and intentional too. It's not just delivering information from one end to another. It's more of that exchange of information and getting research needs. And we want that to be a fluid process and a cycle, so not just science delivery, but exchange. And that's why we have it in the name for our network.
All right, the next question, how are topics for the notice of funding opportunity announcements selected each year?
Sure, I can take that, and I actually have a slide that I can show that answers it. Pull up to that slide. So Colleen showed a cycle of our work. It is cyclical. We identify a new management problem. So let me just enlarge this a little bit. Great. So one of the very first steps in our work is identifying what are some of the emerging needs at the current moment. And so we identify or we receive research needs and we gather them at JFSP in different ways, and they come to us from different places. So one of the ways, and one of the biggest ways that we hear about what some of your needs currently are from the field. And so the predominant way a lot of the research needs come to us are through our fire science exchange networks, or exchange network, excuse me. So our exchanges will work with their end users. They'll have their conferences, workshops. They put out a lot of evaluations and surveys, asking their community, what are some of the big issues currently? And then they will basically sum those up and send those our way to our science advisor, to Molly, based on, here's what we're hearing about in the field. But that's just one way. We also hear directly from folks in the field, from the fuels management community. We also hear from our governing board. That's another place where research needs come to us from. So as Colleen mentioned, our board is very diverse. It includes people with science backgrounds. It also includes people with management backgrounds, and they also come from different agencies. So they will go and basically solicit this information from their partners, and they'll come to us. And oftentimes we do have a lot of our board members who bring up issues to us that often, will make their way into topics every year. And then another way is through our office, through the partners that we have. So we have partners at NIFC, and we've worked with, for example, last year with the National Invasive Species folks. And so they sent a couple of research needs. So as you can imagine, because of funding, we cannot solicit topics on every single research need that we get on a yearly basis. So there is a process that we go through where we present all of our research needs to our governing board and go through a process of figuring out, what is an emerging issue. We rank, we vote, they rank and they vote, and then they decide how much money we have available to fund the number of topics. So that is how the topics make themselves into the solicitations every year.
Can I just add a couple things onto what Karen said real quick? I think it's also important to note that if you are participating on any of the NWCG committees or subcommittees, that's another good way to, you are the sounding board, right? You're at the meetings, you're hearing the concerns, you're hearing what the issues are. We'd like for you to forward those through NWCG as well. Many times our governing board members or even folks within our program office are liaisons to NWCG committees. So that's one way. Another way is through your FMOs, your state FMOs, your assistant deputy FMOs. They are also able to forward information to our governing board members. And so, you know, ground truthing, what's going on, what is the chat going on, what's important to you. Those are a couple of the other ways that you can get that information to us.
Great, thanks for that. Next one from Kyle Cowan. What is JFSP's involvement in firefighter mental health?
Would you like me to take that one, Karen? Okay. Thank you, Kyle, for your question. That's really important. And I can expand on what we already discussed about, you know, how it started with the COVID-19 tool and the assessment tool. And there was a group that formed from that. And we have a partnership that has been tasked by FMB to be involved. And it's become such a priority for the Joint Fire Science Program that we hired back the previous program manager, Ed Brenson, to focus on this topic and to interface with what's called the MFAT, Mental and Physical Health Task Group. And so he is coordinating with them and helping to sense what the research needs are in the community and help facilitate that. So we're partners in that. At the moment, we just funded a proposal so that we can look at an assessment and identify where the gaps are and what's needed to move on further so that we're able to collectively get everyone's voice in the conversation. As you know, health and medical standards are not our business. We are in the business of funding fire management. And so what we're doing is we are a voice at the table to help really the sensing, but also our process because of the integrity that we have with the scientific process and peer reviewing and so forth. So we are one of the many players in this arena, but it has become such a priority for us that it is sustained research at this point.
Thanks for that. And then we have one more question from Ian. Can you describe the coordination with JFSP and is it California? Do you know what that is? Or Ian?
Yes, yeah, we can take that. Yeah, so
good.
acronyms, right? World of acronyms. So that's the Climate Adaptation Science Centers, or CASCs for short. It's part of the USGS. It's under the USGS umbrella. And so these are different groups within USGS with a strong focus on climate change, changing climate. And so that's actually a really timely question. I'm trying to say, Ian, because we actually just started a really strong partnership with the CASCs. And so one of our funding opportunity announcements that we solicited that we're currently going through peer review right now and will be funding starting this summer, fall, relates to a partnership where we're asking some of the researchers to work with different CASCs in the Southwest as well as California. And our exchanges will be supporting this partnership essentially, where we're asking folks to look at a changing climate, especially under changing fire regimes, and how they can develop products and actually implement some work on the ground in response to a changing climate. And so this is something that we're getting going on and really excited. This is a really strong partnership we have formed. And Colleen, do you want to add a little bit more about our long-term plan with the CASC?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like Karen said, last year we put out a solicitation for place-based partnerships with the CASCs, and we got a good response, and we consider that to be a pilot. So as we move forward, we consider that to be another one of our sustained or longer, more longevity for our research under our primary category of funding. And so we've had discussions with other CASCs, and those are a USGS entity, the Climate Adaptation Science Centers. And so we've seen a lot of movement there and a good opportunity for partnership, sharing information, but also it's a cost share. So that's good for everybody to avoid duplicate efforts and work towards a common goal.
All right, that was our last question. Do you guys have anything for closing, Karen and Colleen, before we close out for today?
Well, just put out the additional plug, take a look at our website, sign up for the Friday Flash if you're interested. Hopefully it's not overwhelming, but you'll usually advertise one thing, whether it's one product, one publication, one upcoming webinar. This week, we just advertised a podcast related, a Wildland Fire Series podcast, which I think a lot of you would find interesting. And then also, lean on your exchange networks. I think they would love to hear from you, and you're the community that they want to interface with, learn from. So those are a few plugs that I have. How about you, Colleen?
That was what I wanted to share as well, leave you with an opportunity to get more involved with the Fire Science Exchange Network and JFSP in general. Please reach out to us if you have any additional questions that we weren't able to get to today. And we're just really pleased for the opportunity to share with you, and look forward to more interactions.
All right, thank you guys. Appreciate both of you joining us today for Fire Chat Friday. Thank you, Molly, for introducing Karen and Colleen. Thanks, everyone. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday and to the weekend. We just kind of give you an update. We do have 2 Fire Chat Fridays scheduled for April and May. Nothing on the books yet for March, but we'll let you guys know on that. But for April, we're going to look and get an update provided to us by the National Fire Equipment Program, kind of what's happening in their program, new videos, new content, new information to share. And then in May, we're going to have an overview of the Incident Strategic Alignment Process, or ISAP. That'll be discussed during the upcoming agency administrator training, and more detailed information from that will be provided to you. So 2 upcoming Fire Chat Fridays to tune into. But again, thank you guys all for joining. Appreciate it, and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, everyone.